Hi, thank you so much for tuning in. In this episode, I'm going to be touching a little bit on capital gains tax. In case you're wondering what that is, just keep watching. I'll share what that is specifically and its implications on you as a property buyer or investor. You're watching Own Land in Kenya. I am Solomon Wangwe. So, for those of you who may not know what capital gains tax is, or CGT as is loosely referred to, that's basically a new tax. Well, new because it had been suspended for decades, from way back when, and brought back to life a couple of years ago, with the Kenya Revenue Authority obviously trying to beef up its tax revenue collection by levying a tax on all profits made by a land seller or property seller. It's not just limited to land. Basically, if you're going to buy a piece of property, whether it's land or a developed building, and you choose to sell it at some point in the future, the Kenya Revenue Authority was requiring you to pay a 5% tax on the net profits. And that basically means you take into account what it cost you as far as purchase price is concerned, legal fees, subdivision costs, fencing, security, if you have been keeping track of those expenses, which can be tricky, especially if you've owned it for some years, but they were allowing you to account for all those expenses, subtract the total amount from your selling price, or what you sold the property for, and whatever that amount is, you pay 5% to the Kenya Revenue Authority. And that is completely separate from stamp duty, which is typically paid by the purchaser or the buyer of a property. This was an extra 5% on your net profits. And so that's what capital gains tax is, because they're taxing your gains in capital or money, right? So that's what the CGT means. That has been a complicated process to regularize since they made it official. I believe that was on the 1st of January of 2016, when they expected and required everyone who's selling land to pay capital gains. There's been some debate back and forth about when it should be paid, and they eventually said that that tax amount should be paid by the 20th day of the preceding, or rather the next month after the transaction is concluded. So if we sold a property today, they'd require us to pay 5% of our total net profits to KRA by the 20th of the next month. And in case you haven't been keeping track, the High Court on the 13th of February, I believe, suspended that directive because it was challenged by the Law Society of Kenya, because the Kenya Revenue Authority was now trying to enforce the collection of the tax at the point of transfer of the property before the seller actually gets their money, or before the buyer receives their new title documentation. As you can imagine, that's it's an emotive topic to begin with. I mean, property, land, it's Kenya with all the issues we have to deal with, and then very few people think well of the tax collection agency. So you put the two together and you can imagine the angst and basically the problems that it would generate. So the directive on the 13th of April has been seen as a reprieve for a lot of us who trade in property, or the regular guy who's wanting to sell their property, because they've said this is suspended until such a time when we can agree on the best way to collect this tax without encroaching on the rights of the Kenyan to freely trade on their property. Because that's what the Law Society of Kenya has based their challenge to this directive on, is that requiring that you pay your capital gains tax before the transaction is duly registered with the Ministry of Lands basically impedes your ability to exercise your constitutional rights to free access and free dominion on your property. And so in general, it's seen as a good thing. I, for one, I'm glad that there's some debate about how to do this in the most sober manner possible. As registered land traders, generally we're exempt from paying capital gains tax, because as a registered business, you are subject to a 30% income tax as a corporation. So if you're an individual, it's important that you keep track of what's going on with the capital gains tax debate relative to the High Court directive on the 13th of February. In case you missed it, check out our timeline on our Facebook page. We posted up the official notification from the High Court, as well as a legal opinion by the CEO of the Law Society of Kenya, and you'll be well positioned as far as having the right and accurate knowledge about how to sell your property when you do eventually choose to sell it. I hope that helps. If you have any further questions about this particular issue, feel free to engage us through our social media platforms. Our website is up and running. You can even give us a call directly at 07 0001 0001. Again, that's 07 0001 0001, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. You've been watching Own Land in Kenya. I'm Solomon Wangwe. Stay tuned for more information on strategic land investment.